Hello, and welcome back to Therapist Plays Disco Elysium. On today's episode, we're going to do a deep dive into coping mechanisms and the entire psychological process of what does it even mean to cope with something, and how do we go about doing this in both successful and unsuccessful ways. Harry is really bad at coping with things, so we're going to dive into that, and we'll even talk a little bit about how we can actually learn from Disco Elysium how to cope with our own issues better. All that's coming up, so let's dive in. Okay, we're back on the case. We recently listened to some audio evidence. We've got a new lead. Let's go talk to Klassia about that. Now, remember, we are in a new stage of our narrative, character, and professional development. We are no longer Harry sorry boy sad cop. We're Johnny super cop. And we're not taking shit from anybody, especially Klassia.
Hello, officer. What brings you up here again?
Titus gave us a recording where the deceased states his intention to commit a crime.
She put her coffee cup down. This does not surprise her.
What do you have to say about that?
Did he? I never said he was a good man, or that he had good intentions. Only that he was never bad to me.
In this tape, he specifically identifies you as the target.
Where did they get this recording exactly?
It's intercepted radio chatter of the deceased, recorded via a de-encryption station. It's authentic enough.
Does he say he's gonna do it Soldier of the Apocalypse style?
Yes, he does. Those are the exact words he
Yeah.
used.
That was practically his pickup line.
A memory surfaces in her tired neocortex. It's not entirely unpleasant.
Did he say whores a lot? Was he pretty much on the verge of doing it Kohoi style?
Yes. I hate... I'm trying to be a super cop here. I hate feeling like everyone else is 2 steps ahead of me.
He liked the way it sounded when he said it. As to Kohoi,
The reason I'm leaning so much into this, I hope you can tell the difference between me and my roleplay here, is this is a coping strategy, right? Like this is Harry's way of coping with his inferiority and the fact that like he basically feels outpaced by everyone around him. Okay, think of like every single character. He's completely outpaced by Kim professionally, intellectually, and in terms of composure and respect, right? He's completely outpaced in terms of authority by people like Titus and Everard Clare, who command like groups of people in a way that we don't feel confident we can. We're outpaced by Joyce in terms of like our intellectual understanding of the world and the dynamics of the political systems and all of these things. We're even outpaced by like the children, which is why we've had such a such a strong reaction to some of them. Like what we're outpaced by them is in terms of their like I don't know, I guess their ability to cope with things, right? You have Annette who copes with the world through like diving into the escapism of books. You have Kuno, who copes with the world poorly through using narcotics. And we have Frittigirl, who does everything perfectly and is someone we can never match up to, intellectually, spiritually, or personally. So everyone's outpaced us. So, of course, we have to fabricate this idea that we're like the best fucking cop in the world. Like everyone we talk to, like especially those other cops from Precinct 41, like they're embarrassed to even be associated with us. So we have to keep up this facade, basically, that we're hot shit to everyone. It's complete facade, though. It's a complete like coping strategy. And let's talk a little bit about coping because it's interesting from like a comparative sense how different characters do cope with the world, right? What I want to talk about is what the goal of coping is, right? Okay, so what even is this, right? We talk about like coping and how characters cope with things, but like what is it? Coping is the idea that you need to adopt new behaviors and new beliefs that help you deal with something better than you did before, right? That's a fundamentally like what coping is. It's not doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right? It's trying to learn new things to deal with stressors in a better way, right? Many people deal with their issues though using one of two coping strategies, right? They tend to rely on avoidance. Okay, that's one of them. So when we have a stressor, we try to find escapism, we try to distance ourselves from it, we try to deny it, justify it, all kinds of stuff, right? Avoidance is one of the main ways that we cope with things poorly. And the other method is distraction. Okay. When you look at your phone because you're bored, you're basically coping with distraction, right? These are not bad coping skills, but they're really good for small things, right? If we think about stressors as having a range of intensities, right? From 0 to 10, something stressful can be either quite intense or not intense at all. A lot of people's first strategy for coping with things is to try to go from a 10 to a 0, right? They're trying to shortcut the process here and like turn off the anxiety, avoid it, distance ourselves from it, distract from it, whatever we can. But that's not really effective coping. The stress is not a 1 or a 0 kind of situation. There is a range, right? And we should have different coping strategies, different tiers of them that are effective in different ranges, okay? So the goal of effective coping is not to go from 10 to 0. It's to go from a 10 to an 8 and maybe from an 8 to a 7, where one of the skills that helps you here is actually more effective, right? Distraction and avoidance, for example, like avoiding or distracting from boredom by pulling out your phone, is like how you get from a 3 to a 2, right? Distracting yourself because you're stressed about an exam coming up and you need to like watch a television show or something. Maybe it gets you from a 4 to a 3. Like it's a good low tier coping skill. It's not a good high tier coping skill, right? And this is where people sort of learn poor coping strategies is they start using these lower tier strategies for big stressors like grief, right? You hear all the time when people are grieving, I'm trying to stay busy. I'm trying to spend more time at work. I'm spending time with friends. Like the thing is it can be effective, sure, for a time, but it's really kind of kicking the can down the road, right? These methods, they're gonna like bring you down to a lower stressor, but they're not actually solving the problem. They're not effective at making sure the stressor doesn't come back. So effective coping is about learning what is the appropriate tool for the job in terms of stressors, right? This is your crisis zone. What are the skills that should be used in a crisis, okay? Like meditation could be a great coping skill, but being in a crisis, like you probably aren't going to have the time to like sit down, cross your legs, start breathing, doing all this stuff, right? So it's maybe not for this upper tier. It maybe belongs somewhere here, right? But if you can get yourself out of the environment where the stressor is, not avoiding it, right? But intentionally distancing yourself from it, surrounding yourself with people who are supportive, talking to someone, right? This is why like crisis management teams are often effective. It's just because like having someone to connect to and share what you're going through with someone is often enough to just bring us down a couple levels. And then once we're here, right, then you can start implementing some of those skills. You can maybe try some meditation, some breathing exercises, some things that require you to have a little more time, privacy, and you can be a little more methodical with. Then you can start bringing yourself down here where, just staying busy might be a little more effective. So when I think about all of this stuff, and I think about how Harry copes with things, right? He's completely avoidant of like the kinds of stressors that he experiences. Shame, guilt, embarrassment, inferiority, fear, isolation, right? Like addiction. These are all like the stressors of his life, and they're basically all higher order stressors for him. Like he really doesn't have many tools in his belt, right? And this is where addiction often comes into the picture, because addiction is one of those strategies that treats stress like it is a 1 or a 0, right? And if I can just, it is a kind of avoidance, right? Avoid the feelings, numb myself, stimulate myself, use some sort of mind-altering substance, then it makes me, for a time, feel like those stressors are not present. It's temporary. The problem is it doesn't solve anything, right? It doesn't actually like create meaningful change in how you strategize against stress. So that's kind of his problem, right? And we can just look at his skills and we can understand better what some of their goals are, right? Like electrochemistry is the skill that tells him most of all that like coping is just about like soothing yourself, man. You can just go from a 1 to a 0. That's it. Just blast yourself with some nicotine or some magnesium. Volition, right, kind of understands that there's a longer way around, longer process to this that involves like scaling down the level of distress, right? Empathy is kind of its collaborator in that. So they're all effective at different things and not so effective at different things. And I feel like, especially with, all this talk of like his skills being compromised, at least when he's talking to Glacia, that it makes this problem even worse, right? Someone like Kim, we don't see him very stressed. Probably because he's found some ways to really kind of live in this zone, right? His stressors, it takes him a lot to kind of get up to a more crisis sort of area. But I feel like the things that he's learned to utilize in his coping instead of, distraction and avoidance is more like his isolation. Like he doesn't connect a lot with people closely. And yeah, I would say there's some avoidance too, right? He avoids engaging with people like Kuno, and he avoids engaging with ideas like the Pale, because that's the kind of shit that would bring him up to levels where he may not have the kinds of coping skills to deal with them, right? And when people who don't spend a lot of time learning what it's like to be up here go there, they respond with violence and other unsavory behaviors. It's just about poor coping. That's it. That's a lot of the problems with many of the characters here. On a societal level, how does Revachol cope with the conditions that the society is in, right? It's similar kinds of things. It's distraction through addiction, right? Distract from the reality that life is kind of miserable. And it's trying to assert control, these different powers at play, sort of trying to cope with like the slipping away of reality with some sort of grasping at like what's immediately controllable, other people or the economic situation. We talk about personality disorders. Personality disorders are essentially someone who has developed a fundamentally flawed way of coping with the world, right? And the way that they cope with negative self-reflection is by blaming, deflecting blame, right? It's by becoming overly attached and seeking validation in the case of, you know, like borderline and narcissism, let's say. They're just like someone who has really not had the conditions to develop effective coping skills. It's really hard to unroot that stuff. And really with a true personality disorder, it's, you know, it's not really possible to fully unroot some of that stuff. You can start to manage it, but yeah, it's just really hard. It's a really complex problem, basically. So when I'm working with people, I'm trying to understand how do they cope with things? How does my framework of them start with, okay, what is Harry actually like? How does he view his problems and how does he deal with them? Well, one of the ways that we have coped with our inferiority is this guy right here. The flashlight, okay? You thought it was just a gimmick that I've been using as a sort of like funny narrative device, but this whole time I've been role-playing it as an actual psychological component of our character. Like, he doesn't feel like he lives up to what people say he is, you know? Like, he's not a super cop. He barely even feels like a cop. He didn't even know he was a cop. He's basically like carrying this thing around because that's like what a child's idea of what a cop might have, right? Kind of like Harry has like very childlike ideas or very simplistic ideas about political systems, right? Other people have already commented on how the political discussions in this game are also like very facade-like ways of just failing to understand the world. So he simplifies them into these really one-dimensional templates. Wearing fucking Dick McMullen's hat. Like, these are all things that I imagine our character to be using to sort of dress himself up in the facade of what he thinks should be his own ideal. And now we're even deeper invested in that, because before we were sort of playing the part because that's what like we thought we should do to stand next to Kim. Now that our fucking brain has broken and we're relapsing into like delusional grandiose fantasy, we're gonna start seeing a lot more of that from our character, like really leaning in and not just compensating with this stuff, but buying into it, like hardcore. So let's see how that plays out.
He wasn't actually there. He didn't do a tour, or at least didn't tell me he did. Would have been overkill anyway. He lived his own little cohoy. It wasn't his everything.
Do you think he was trying to scare
No.
people?
I'm pretty sure he did all those things, and then had to internalize them to keep on living, until they just sort of turn into his, what's the word I'm looking for?
What the fuck? How does this keep happening? I was just fucking talking about this. Like, this is such a fucking meme at this point. This game, it's on like the same brainwave as me. I cannot believe this. It just immediately presents dialogue that perfectly matches what I was talking about. Goddamn, that is actually creepy. Okay, let's...
Running joke. I was gonna say running joke. And it sounds like you didn't even get the good bits. Lely's punchlines got way, way funkier than that. He was like the Seminoles conflict,
Lely.
the Kohoi massacre, and the 36 famine in Yezud all rolled into one person, then cast in Norani's
Interesting.
ceramic armor, which he wore in bed and in the shower.
So this is exactly what I was just talking about, except from that character's perspective. Like, what parts of our identity are crafted from the influences that we collect about what our culture thinks we should be, about what we think other people expect from us, about what our role tells us we should look and sound like as a cop, right? And for this individual, you know, some of those things seem to be in effect.
When he said he was done, and done mentally, it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like a deeply troubled man.
Perhaps we can relate. He said he was mentally done. That sounds like a broken man to me.
Well, maybe I pieced him back together with my magical personality.
Liar! Lies! You're a liar! You like this kind of stuff, huh? You like playing with the feelings of men?
We're all scraping up any happiness we can find, officer. Going around with our little scouring sticks. You, your first love, Mr. Kohoi here.
So you're just like the rest of I'm trying not to have my character just turn into the Joker.
Did he tell you he had actually done any of those things? Here in Martinez, I mean?
But especially when it comes to Harry's trauma with women, right? I can see that a lot of his compensatory behaviors are a direct result of the way he feels like the perception of women have a certain kind of power over him, right? That his attraction to them is a kind of a weakness. His ability to be swayed by their promises of love and companionship are make his the currencies of trust very vulnerable to him, because he doesn't know how not to just gamble it all away.
No. We were too busy laying waste to our own nervous systems to direct any of the fury outward. He seemed happy, I guess. At ease. As much as a man like him could be.
There is a small measure of pride in her that she could quell the rage in such a being.
This brings up an interesting question, which is it a healthy idea to think that a person can be part of your coping strategy, right? And I'll make a distinction between coping skills and coping strategies. A coping skill is, right, a meditation, a breathing exercise, going for a run, listening to music, right? It's a skill that's designed for a certain range of, like, stepping down in this process. But a strategy is a more comprehensive, bigger picture idea to me, right? If I told someone, I want you to go practice at the gym, practice playing basketball, for example, but I didn't give them any clear guidance, right? My pupil is going to go to the gym and, like, not really know what to do. Maybe they'll spend like a couple hours just shooting 3-pointers and maybe a couple hours shooting free throws, but there'd be nothing cohesive about that. They just would be randomly practicing, right? Because I didn't give any clear direction. You want to strategize and say, okay, well, I want you to start with this exercise and I want you to build up into this. And then I want you to, you know, like, give some cohesion to the structure of what you're trying to train for. And when we find that a person has become like our coping strategy, we start relying on that. We start becoming codependent, where we feel like, oh, the only way for me to step down at any of these levels, I need this person. She's the only one who cures my rage. She's the only one who understands me. She's the only one who I can really talk to, right? But that kind of reliance on someone, like, it's one strategy that doesn't always have the same play, right? You want to have a diverse range of skills and strategies that work for different occasions. A strategy that works when you do have your partner. You know, there are skills that are healthy coping when you're alone, and then there's ones that are healthy coping when you're with someone, right? Like going out to the bar and having a drink with friends could be a great coping skill, for example, you know, some time to vent, catch up, reflect on the day. Going out to the bar, drinking by yourself, less so, less of a coping skill, right? It's not the strategy to rely on just because it works in one occasion. Context is everything. And so finding that like another person is how you cope with the world, I feel like is just setting yourself up for a very narrow strategy that's not very cohesive and not very adaptable to real life, right? The fact that Clausia finds pride in this tells me something about her own coping strategies. That she seems to think that that's like a reasonable way to cope with the world as well.
Thank you for clearing that up, miss. Whenever you're ready. I'm interested to hear what Titus Hardy has to say now.
She takes a very small sip of her coffee and smiles.
Now that you've had some time, can you tell us more about the victim? I'm so... my inner monologue towards her is so petty now.
Like, for example, his name?
Yeah, how about you tell us his name?
Actually, officer, I didn't know his name. I just called him Lely.
Is that right?
A nickname?
I guess. He came from Lelystad. It's short for that. And it was his army name, apparently. He said his real name wasn't his. I tried to pry it out of him, but it was no use.
Lelystad. That's a good start.
I think that might be a real Dutch place. It sounds familiar, Lelystad.
We have a few questions you can help us with. A few things a field autopsy alone can't answer.
The young woman cranes her neck, trying to catch a glimpse of the page the lieutenant passed to you. On it is a list of autopsy observations recorded neatly in blue ink.
No. No. No craning here. No craning your neck, okay? Part of my way of coping is to exclude you from this. You're not a part of my world. I don't want you to be a part of my world. I don't need you. I don't need anybody. And genuinely, I think that Harry has probably fallen into that trap where his ex-partner was his sole avenue for coping, and all of his skills were attached to her. But the problem is when you invest all of your coping skills and strategies into one person, and then you lose that person. Like, who are you and what do you have left, basically? You're nobody, and you have nothing. It's a little too real.
The last missing pieces of a puzzle of flesh.
Oh my god, that line. The last missing pieces of a puzzle of flesh. I feel like Inland Empire and Shivers are kind of... maybe our way of coping with, like, the Pale. There are, like, connection to the intangible parts of the world. I mean, it's interesting that our character is, like, full-on Psyche build. More Psyche physique. That we can see his coping strategies play out in that, right? We try to interpret the world in these like very abstract ways, right? What people are thinking, what people are feeling, what people's intentions are, what kind of subtext we can pick up, and what our morals tell us. It's all very abstract, right? The language of the psyche is. Meanwhile, you have like these intellect skills, right? And their angles on coping are more reality-based. It's like trying to understand people, analyze, critically evaluate. They're much more tangible. Visual calculus. What can I see, hear, detect? Drama, rhetoric, logic, like what's concrete. Our character is not a very concrete thinker, which makes sense why he's like willing to engage in this like disconnect from reality sort of talk. So it's just interesting. It's kind of interesting how that parallels Kim as well, because we talked about Kim being more of a person who lives kind of more down here and more up here, right? He's more in those ranges of skills, at least in terms of his personality, and that checks out because he's a lot more of a concrete thinker. He tries not to deal in suspicion or things that can't be backed up by evidence, and so he doesn't like engaging with the pale, and he doesn't like he doesn't like role playing with us, basically. Let's just run through these. Where is Lelystad?
In Oranje, officer. It's, I think municipality is the term. A nowhere town there.
Maybe there's someone correct me on this. Is this inspired by Dutch culture? Because Oranje is the Dutch word for orange, and orange is the Dutch color. And Lelystad, I gotta look this up. This may actually be a real place. Okay, yeah, it is actually a real place. I've never been there. I lived in South Holland, so like more closer to Amsterdam and Den Haag. So I never went there, but yeah, I'm curious to research this a little more.
Oranje? Oranje's map of waterways? This fits with his tattoo.
Waterways would also check out. Lots of canals in the Netherlands.
You were almost right, officer. That means his race was occidental, not mondial. I'll update the form.
You're both from Oranje?
Yes. We were compatriots.
Did that bring you together?
No. He was too old for that. And from another part of Oranjenrijk. I didn't even understand his accent. What brought us together wasn't Oranje. It was bad habits.
Interesting. So, it checks out that part of the attachment, right? I think part of the reason we are attracted to people is the validation we get when we see them try to, use the same coping skills that we have, right? And some of that self-destruction, the bad habits, definitely brought them together.
Sex. Alcohol.
How old was he?
He was 42.
42? Are you sure? I would have had him above 50.
He had many scars that made him appear older. But no, we even celebrated his birthday like some weeks ago. It was a funny 2 days. He had little reason to lie to me.
I don't believe you. You have, from what I can tell, you have no reason to lie to me. But that's all you've done so far.
We were slightly off then. Thank you for clearing
sorry,
that.
Kim.
The adversary one.
What was his eye color?
Blue. Light blue. They were like little blue galaxies, It was strange, seeing those eyes in his fucked up face. Pardon the swearing. I do him an injustice. He wasn't ugly. And he had a beautiful, soft voice. Very surprising, what with all the scarring. It was quite something, watching him speak.
He had a combat wound on his chin and mouth?
Yes. Severe. It made him look like half his face was cracking away in some strange smile. That and those eyes.
Ah, yes. His hair, if you can remember?
It was light brown, almost blonde. He darkened it with brilliantine, made oily. Not nice to stroke. I couldn't convince him to leave it alone.
I don't know. How much is Kim buying of this? How compromised is he? I wonder what Kim's relationships have been like. What are his schemas about women, or men, or romance in general?
Oh, that.
It's clear she liked it.
You liked
Quite a lot, yes.
it? It was an Aranese map of the waterway?
Sure, waterways. It was mostly for showing off to chicks, though.
For showing off to chicks. How so?
How? Imagine him lying in bed. Freakish musculature laid out on the sheets. Scarred, of course. Tattooed. The sheets are dirty for some reason. He's smoking and drinking, of course. And his chest and shoulders and arms are studded with stars. Tens, hundreds of them. Maybe even thousands. And the woman goes like, "What was this, baby?" And he says, "That was too hardcore. Don't ask me about that." So she goes, "Okay, but what's this, baby?" And he's like, "Saw some bat shit there. Killed some loincloths." And so it goes. Star after star, port after port, third world country after third world country. And he's done horrible things in every single one of them.
The woman in this?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us precisely what these mean?
No, thank you. I've seen enough of him dead. I can tell you what they meant without looking at them.
You don't want to cooperate, huh?
Go on.
He was a blue-eyed boy with thick arms, from a small town. He was also poor, and the government of Oranje needed some people killed, so they turned him into a grotesque killer. For money. He went to Killer Academy in Vredefort. Then he killed some people on the Semenine Islands. And on other islands, too. All of the islands. After this, he came to Revachol and got killed himself.
Jeez, that's a fucking horror story, not a very fun story.
It is when you're high. It can be very exciting
that's
then.
true. Almost
You have
everything
the
is
tools
exciting
to deal
when you're
with
high.
it. It's not a very nice story to remember when you're sober. A change of topic?
Not a nice story when you're sober. Of course not. Let's just deny that there's any of this range of stressors at all. Let's just live down here, baby. Let's get drunk. Let's get high. Let's try to spend no time at all thinking about our woes and our worries or our traumatic backgrounds. Let's just live here, where the only stressor is, can I get my fix? It's really sad. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, this is the work that I do on a daily basis, is working with people who are struggling with addiction and, you know, have not been given the opportunities to develop healthy coping skills. And so, you know, it's not just like getting sober is only step one, right? All of the other stuff is like, how do you learn a more effective way of like living life and understanding that there are more than just that as an option, right? And it takes a lot. It takes complete rewiring of your brain in some cases to see that path forward. So, little too real as well for me, because it's something I deal with all the time. Did he enjoy his death? Why are we asking about this? I don't know. I'm gonna go through all of these.
Why do you ask?
It came to me in a cult vision. Did it? I can't remember at this point. I've been playing this game for like fucking 5 months now, so I can't really remember all the details. It's just a feeling I have. Indulge me.
Well, it's wrong. He had too many drinks to down and too many bad things to do. Couldn't tap out just yet.
Could it be that love did him in?
It very well could be, yes.
Tell me more.
What do I mean? I have no idea. I don't even know what you mean. Love did him in? What does that mean?
I mean, to me, it means like he gave up everything in the pursuit of romantic connection because it was the only thing that tethered him to the world besides drugs and other indulgence. But it doesn't sound like he really experienced love. He just lust was a facade for love. Oh, is he talking about when we saw him in the out there? When we had that vision? when we first got him down? Did he say some shit like that? Love did me in? I honestly can't remember, guys. It's been too long. I think he did tell us that. Let's say that.
That's not funny, officer.
Her voice is like a slash through the air. Her shoulders tense up.
Again, someone out there is going to be mad that I chose this option, but like, I'm just clicking through shit here.
There, she momentarily lost control over straight back guy. It appears that she feels guilty.
Here we go. This is what I was looking for. It's time for us to go on the attack. We're a super cop now. This is how we investigate. Press onward. Do you feel guilty?
Of course I do. I'm hungover. I feel guilty about everything.
Do you feel guilty about what happened to him?
Yeah, go at him, Kim.
Among many other things, yes. I could have done something. There's always something you can do, right? Ask me something else.
You're not in charge of this investigation. Okay, but on the real, yeah, it's a sad situation. Was it communism that killed him? Fuck it. I'm just fuck it. Why not?
A moment ago it was love. And no, I don't think the Union is communist. They're a couple of shades pinker than that. They're not hardcore in that way, is what I'm trying to say. What are we talking about anyway? This politics shit is a lot in the morning. Is it even morning?
That's a good question.
I think she's just tired. She doesn't know what you meant by that.
I don't know what
And
I
can
meant
you
by
blame
that.
her?
No.
You could blame her a little. It was a pretty straightforward question that she refused to answer.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Thank you, Volition, for supporting me in my fucking crazy line of questioning. Look, I'm leaning into we're Johnny Super Cop now. We are buying into the fantasy as part of our way of coping with extreme insecurity and inferiority, which, again, I do suggest at some point we may find opportunities to rebalance and realign ourselves with, like, reality. But this interaction with Klasia, especially due to our past trauma with relationships and women, has, like, completely thrown us into delusional compensation. And so I do think that our guy, whereas before he might have been a little disturbed by the visions, thinking them just to be like sort of crazed visions in his like as a result of his use of drugs or head injury. But the kind of grandiosity that we're feeling, he might actually believe this shit now. Let's go with it.
The lieutenant blinks. His expression does not change.
Very concrete of you, Kim.
All right, let's see where this is going.
It's for the case. It's for the case, Kim. From way out in the northwest, he told me.
Cool.
Ah, you don't want to bite on that, huh? It's so insensitive. Clearly she cares about him, and we're talking about, like... We requested a semen screening from processing.
Good for you.
Yeah, well, you know what, Klasia?
What do you think it will tell us?
I don't know how a semen sample works, officers. How many days after intercourse does it have to be? I don't even know if he had sex with someone else. We didn't go steady.
Is she avoiding anything? Technically not.
My rhetoric is at 2. What did it have to do to chime in? Did I roll a 6? 8.
Technically not. Come on, man. Listen. You can't trust them. It's just you and me.
God damn it! I'm terrified of this whole compromised thing. Volition just wants me to rely on it. It alone. You're all looking fucking compromised to me, to be honest. I think we're finished with this line of questioning.
All right.
Coolly, gracefully, she pours herself more coffee.
We'll come back to that. Interesting exchange. Yeah, I think that Klassia opens up quite a bit of interesting discussion about how people cope with things very differently. And how people just develop methods of coping that are not always helpful, right? We still don't know why or even really what she was super untruthful about. I feel like in due time we might understand that better. But when we start seeing a pattern of coping, right? A pattern being something like using lots of substances, right? We know that that strategy has become like a maladaptive strategy for coping, which is when it becomes hard to unroot. Less so when there's just a bad coping skill, but when the strategy is bad, we got a lot of work to do.